No, I'm not having any second thoughts about representing President Trump. It is the proudest thing I could ever do. What I am having second thoughts about is the license that I stand here with that the people in there are supposed to have. I have not spoken because I respect my ethics while I'm on trial. But let me now speak about what has happened. I have sat on trial after trial for months in this state, the state of New York. Attorney General Letitia James, and now this. Weeks. Why? Because President Trump is leading in the polls, and now we see what you get in New York. So don't get it twisted, whoever asked me that question. I am so proud to stand with President Trump. But I am not proud to stand with what I saw in that courtroom.
Ms. Habba, is the
I'm not finished. Let me just finish, and I'll take questions, please. Before I walked into court, that judge decided that every single defense President Trump had, we were not allowed to raise in front of the jury. It is in writing, and I encourage the journalists, the real journalists, to take the minute to look at his orders. There was no proof. And I couldn't prove that she didn't bring in the dress. There was no DNA. There was no expert. My experts were denied. Two of them were denied to come in. I have sat with President Trump for years now, while he has been targeted with lies and with judges, AGs, and DAs who have specifically run in this city and others on getting Trump. The Trump administration will fix this problem. We will stop Kamala Harris's regime, because she was there, let's not forget that, and she still is, of using officials from the White House, putting them in DA's offices, in AG's offices, and attacking your political opponent. And this country deserves better than this. We do. We should not be sitting here at a press conference talking about this. We did this in 2016, and every woman had no reports. They come out when it's election time. And as a woman who has stood with President Trump, who has spent extensive time with President Trump and with his beautiful family, I will tell you, that is not President Trump. And I completely am disgusted by what I have seen happen to this person, his family, and the Trump organization that we stand in right now.
Alina Habba, who was very public, there she is. You might remember her face. I'm sure you do, because she was very public during Trump's court cases. Speaking of quick on feet, she's very quick on her feet. Could she be the one to replace Karoline Leavitt, as is being speculated by Fox Digital this morning?
Yeah, there's no reason to dispute that. She'd be a terrific choice. She certainly has the chops for it, and certainly has demonstrated that she can represent President Trump ably.
Well, some of the other names, her, Stephen Miller, Katie Miller, Scott Jennings, Anna Kelly. Is there any one that jumps out for you as a number one?
No, I think that Alina Habba is probably the best choice for that.
The most recent federal indictment of former FBI Director James Comey related to an Instagram post of seashells, an Instagram post that he deleted the very next day and apologized for. Do you think Comey's post rises to the level of a criminal threat against the life of the president and supports an indictment?
I do. I'll explain why. After Comey's post, and this is where I go back to Saturday's events, the responsibility of certain individuals like us. We all have a very big voice. He is a former FBI director. He knows what 8647 meant. There's no question about it. He actually went on TV later.
What do you think 86 means?
To kill the president, to get rid of the president. That's what it means. By the way, his words, not mine. If you look at his late night show.
But the dictionary disagrees with you on that.
Well, he's the FBI director.
They use it in restaurants. Do they mean to kill any
You don't
of the
think
meat?
it
What do
might
they kill?
remove him?
Let
Let me just tell you what happened after James Comey's post. A gentleman posted that about me. He posted on Twitter, 86 Habba, and he was also charged. He was charged in Florida, and he was held accountable, because you cannot do it. Now, this is an FBI director. We have responsibilities. You guys have responsibilities not to call the president certain things or say things that could incite violence. I most certainly think after Saturday, I have a completely new perspective on how important our voices are and how we use.
What's up, family? Welcome back to the channel. So before we get into this, hit that like button, share this video with somebody who needs to hear the truth. Subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on those notifications so you never miss when we break this down. Now, we got a big one today. The White House press room is about to go through a major shakeup, and the media is already spinning it in every direction they can. Caroline Leavitt is stepping down as White House press secretary at the end of August. She's 28 years old, the youngest person to ever hold that position in American history. She took that podium in January 2025 at the beginning of Trump's second term. And she held it down through some of the most intense media battles we've ever seen. Now she's stepping back, and the question everybody asking is who's next? And what I'm here to tell you today is the media narrative around this is already wrong. So let's break this down from the top. Caroline Leavitt announced she would end her tenure at the end of August. President Trump posted on Truth Social, calling her one of his most trusted aides. Let me say that again. One of his most trusted aides. That's not a firing. That's not a scandal. That's not dysfunction. That's a young mother making a family decision and a president respecting her enough to let her do it. And she gave birth to her second child in May of this year. And she's got two children under the age of two kids under 2 years old. And I want you to think about that for a second. She has been standing at that podium taking questions from a hostile press corps day after day, week after week, while raising two babies at home. And she did it with the level of composure that most people in Washington could not dream of. She also did it while she was pregnant. And she described her decision as bittersweet, quote unquote, in a post on X. And she thanked the president. She said, and I quote, "I will always remain a vocal advocate for MAGA in the Republican Party." And that's not somebody leaving because they're mad. That's somebody leaving because she's choosing her family and she's doing it on her own terms. And the media wants you to believe this is some kind of crisis. Now, let's think about what the media is doing with this story. Every outlet from CNN to MSNBC to the legacy papers is running angles trying to paint this as chaos, as a sign that something is wrong inside the administration. But here are the facts. Leavitt is staying on as a top advisor. Trump says she will remain an influential voice within the Republican Party. So she's not leaving the team, she's leaving the podium. And there is a difference, and the media knows the difference. They just don't want you to know it. I mean, think about it from an everyday perspective. If you worked at a high stress job 60, 70 hours a week, and you got two babies at home, and you decide to step back into a less public role so you can actually be present for your kids, is that a crisis? No, that's a responsible adult making a responsible choice. But in Washington, when you are a conservative woman working for Donald Trump, they treat a family decision like a scandal, and that's part of the problem. And let me give you some numbers so you understand what we're talking about here. Caroline Leavitt was 28 years old when she took that podium, the youngest press secretary in the history of the United States. She served for roughly 8 months. In that time, she fundamentally changed how the White House interacts with the media. She opened the briefing room to independent journalists, to podcasters, to content creators who don't work for the corporate media outlets. And she broke the monopoly that CNN, ABC, NBC, CBS, and the rest of them had on access to the White House. And the legacy media hated her for it. They hated her because she was effective. She walked into that room every single day, knowing they were going to try to trap her, and she beat them at their own game. That is her legacy, not a scandal, not a crisis. A 28-year-old mother who took on an entire Washington press corps and won. Now, here's where the bigger conversation comes in. Who replaces her? And this is where the story gets really interesting because the media wants you to believe there's some kind of internal drama about it. But the reality is there's a deep bench of talent ready to step up. And the better markings on Kalshi had Alina Habba as the early favorite. Bettors gave her a 35% chance of being named Leavitt's replacement. And when that news hit, the media went crazy. They started running stories about Abba, about her background, about her time as Trump's personal lawyer, about her serving as an interim U.S. attorney in New Jersey. And Habba did something that I absolutely love. She went on X and she posted, quote, "Flattered by the Cauchy odds, but I'm not in the running for any job. However, if I'm getting a new one, I love for one of these anonymous sources to let me know first. Fake news remains the undefeated champ. Well, until I come at them," unquote. Now, pause for a second and think about that. That is a woman who knows how to handle the media. She didn't get defensive. She didn't get flustered. She took the speculation, dismissed it with humor, and then she took a shot at the fake news. And that is exactly the kind of person you want standing behind that podium. Now, the media ran with that post and they said, see, Abba ruled it out. The administration is scrambling. But here's the thing. Abba said she's not in the running for any job. She didn't say she wouldn't take the job if the president asked her. And that's a distinction that matters. She currently serves as senior advisor to the Attorney General for U.S. attorneys, all right? Currently. That's already a high level position. She served as a counselor to the president. She served as an interim U.S. attorney for the District of New Jersey. She's been in the trenches with Trump since 2021 when she joined his personal legal team, and she represented him in the hush money trial in New York in 2024 when he was convicted on 34 felony accounts. Trump called her, quote, unwavering in her loyalty and a tireless advocate for justice, unquote. And this is not somebody who needs to audition for a job. This is somebody who has already proven herself at the highest levels of legal and political combat. And the fact that she's not publicly campaigning for the role actually makes her more qualified, not less. And let me tell you about Alina Habba so you understand who we're talking about. She's 42 years old. She met Trump at his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey in 2021. She joined his legal team and almost immediately became one of the most visible defenders in the media. And she was on cable news constantly pushing back against the lawfare that was being waged against Trump. And she did it with a level of precision and, composure that most lawyers can't pull off on television. And she's not just a legal mind, she's a communicator. She knows how to take complex legal arguments and break them down in plain English so regular people can understand them. And that is exactly what a press secretary needs to do. Sean Spicer, former White House press secretary, said it best. He said, quote, the next press secretary will undoubtedly be someone who has a strong existing relationship with Trump, unquote. That's the standard, and Alina Habba meets it. All right?
Can I mention one thing, that Matt Gaetz also used that 86 many times and nothing happened to him?
Well, I think we look at everything. I'll be honest with you. Absolutely everything is in context. I don't think anybody is immune to it. I don't think we should be sitting here and nobody has condemned Jimmy Kimmel for his comments. Those were despicable.
Joy pointed out earlier, and the president also posted death to Democrats. Do you think the president should be held responsible for that?
When all due respect, I haven't seen that post. I will tell you what I did.
It does exist.
Okay, what I can tell you is this, and who was the Attorney General and the DOJ at that point?
Probably Pam Bondi, no?
Yeah.
No, here's how I feel about this. Here's directly how I feel about this. Nobody should be inciting violence, period.
Including the president.
But you have to remember something. The Department of Justice brings real cases. We are not Jack Smith. We are not Letitia James. We bring real cases against people.
No, I know. I actually had the pleasure of serving as a former federal prosecutor at the Department of Justice. But let me ask you this. I do believe that this is a vindictive prosecution against Comey, directed by the president. And so far with little success, because he's done this many times. As Trump's personal attorney, you actually were sanctioned nearly $1 million for filing a frivolous civil lawsuit against Comey, against Hillary Clinton and others, that a federal judge called political grievances masquerading as legal claims. So why should anyone believe this pattern of targeting Trump's enemies is about justice and not revenge?
If you think that the Russian collusion hoax, if you think that the things that we've now seen evidence of in this Department of Justice aren't real, I just tell you to sit tight, because things are coming. Because what they did was weaponized. I don't want to hear about weaponization, because the reason you all know who I am is because of weaponization. I sat through targeting, people saying we're going to get Trump, and then a Hillary Clinton appointed judge sanctioned me for suing Hillary Clinton. By the way, I'm proud of that. Well, I'm proud of what I did.
Actually,
let me get Alyssa in here. Let me get Alyssa.
I just have to correct something,
okay.
though, Whoopi. It was actually Bill Clinton, but that appointed that judge, but also a three-judge panel, consisting of a Bush appointee, a Trump appointee, and a Biden appointee actually agreed with that court's decision, and in the 36-page opinion.
Which one was it again?
And basically,
I do want to move on because,
do your thing.
as I mentioned,
renewed
a lot of my friend and family supported this president. A lot of them still do, but they vote for him on the cost of living. And we're talking about all these issues that seem so just secondary to what the American people care about. The cost of childcare, the cost of gas right now, basic ability to make ends meet. I grew up in a family where we really at times were living paycheck to paycheck. So I want to understand, when we're hearing about the war war in Iran, which I can defend Iran not having a nuclear weapon, but a war that's costing us a ton of money, potentially the taxpayers footing a $400 million ballroom, and then these things like focusing on James Comey. Is this what the American
Correction. Taxpayers are not funding the ballroom. Donors funded the ballroom, so it's not coming out of taxpayer monies.
people voted for Trump on? And do you think he's delivering on the cost of living issues?
Okay, there was a lot in there, so let me just break it up. On the cost of living, the one big beautiful bill did more for the American, not the rich, the regular Americans. No tax on tips, Social Security.
What about loss of health care coverage?
How about prescription drug prices going down, egg prices going down? And when you talk about the oil,
for who?
Let's remember for who. Look,
yeah.
Do you think
look at
There's a lot. I am looking at it, and a lot of people lost their health care, their health insurance.
Are you talking about Obamacare? We are Americans. I don't care what your politics are right now. We are Americans that do not allow terrorism. We do not care what your religion is. We do not care about anything other than keeping this country safe. So when Democrats go as far as to lose all basis for loving this country and defend things like terrorism, open borders, people coming in, raping our children, killing our individuals, our citizens from other countries, we don't stand for that, and there's nothing political about it. So the fact that they're trying to spin this into a midterm situation is beyond the pale of ridiculous and frankly not surprising by them. But I think if you look at Kamala Harris's, if you look at polls, Kamala Harris's comments of desperation at Reggie Jackson's funeral, and she didn't even know him. You know, if you look at this, they're reaching so far, and the American people see it.
Now, there are other names in the mix, right? Other names like Scott Jennings is the current betting favorite on Kelsey, who is phenomenal, right? Kills the CNN panels, especially a news night with Abby Phillips. A lot of people wish he just leave CNN, but a lot of people watch because of Scott Jennings on CNN, like myself. I watch the clips, not the network entirely, because I don't want to give them views and ratings that they don't deserve. But however, Scott Jennings being a favorite or betting favorite on Kelsey after Habba's post. Scott Jennings is the CNN political commentator, a former special assistant to President George W. Bush. And he wrote a book called A Revolution of Common Sense: How Donald Trump Stormed Washington and Fought for Western Civilization. Trump has praised him publicly at a rally in Michigan last year. Trump said, "I think he's terrific. He's defending me all the time on CNN." And Trump also said, and this is important, he defends me really well, but he can't go too far because if he goes too far, he'll get fired. Now, that tells you something about how Trump views that role. He wants somebody who's going to fight, but he also understands the game. You got a guy like Scott Jennings on CNN every night arguing against a panel of Democrats. That man has been in the arena. He knows how the media operates because he sits in the middle of it every single day. But then you got Anna Kelly. She's 29 years old, currently serves as a White House deputy press secretary under Karoline Leavitt. She's been in the room. She knows the operations. She already represented the White House in the media, and she worked as national press secretary for the Republican National Committee and for Representative Derek Van Orden of Wisconsin. And that's an internal promotion candidate, somebody who could step in and keep the machine running without missing a beat. And then you got Matthew Boyle, the Washington borough chief of Breitbart, right? He's conducted interviews with Trump in the Oval Office. He knows the administration's message from the outside looking in. You got Katie Miller, conservative podcaster, former press secretary to Mike Pence, communications director for the Department of Government Efficiency. She's married to Stephen Miller, the White House deputy chief of staff. That's a power couple right there. You got Stephen Schuing, White House communications director, longtime Trump advisor who's been with him since 2016. He posted after Leavitt's announcement saying she was, quote, the best teammate. The point is, family, there's no shortage of qualified people. The Washington media wants you to believe this is some kind of crisis because they have no actual scandal to report, and they're trying to manufacture one out of a routine personnel transition. But think about it like this. If this were the Biden administration, a 28-year-old press secretary stepped down to spend time with her two children, the media would be writing glowing profiles about her sacrifice and her dedication to family. They'll call it inspiring. But because it's Trump, because it's a conservative woman who served them well, they frame it as chaos. They can't help themselves. The bias is baked into the coverage. Now let's talk about what happens next, because this isn't just about who sits behind the podium. This is about the midterm elections. This is about the administration's ability to communicate its message to the American people. And when Leavitt was on leave earlier this year, The White House didn't even use a temporary substitute from her office. They had Vice President J.D. Vance give briefings. They had Secretary of State Marco Rubio give briefings, who was phenomenal. That tells you how seriously they take that podium. And they're not going to put up they're not just going to put anybody up there. You even had Dr. Oz up there. And they're going to put somebody who can handle the pressure. A source close to the administration told the BBC, and I quote, "That person will be very aware that he's watching every day." President Trump watches those briefings. He knows what the media is trying to do, and he's going to pick somebody who is not afraid to push back. And this is where Alina Habba's track record becomes impossible to ignore, because you want to see how she handles pressure. Look at what she did in that courtroom. The transcript from the source video shows her standing in front of the media, in front of the legal establishment, and laying out exactly what happened. She said, quote, "Before I walked into the court, that judge decided that every single defense President Trump had, we were not allowed to raise in front of the jury." Right? It is in writing, and I encourage the journalist, the real journalist, to take a minute to look at his orders. And that was in the first clip I played for you guys, that I just quoted what she just said, or what she said in the first clip, and when she said that. And that is a lawyer who knows the record. She's not making emotional arguments. She's pointing to the written orders. She's telling the press to do their jobs and actually read the documents. And then she said there was no proof. And I couldn't even prove that she didn't bring in the dress. There was no DNA. There was no expert. My experts were denied, two of them. Two of them were denied to come in. So listen to that. She's not screaming. She's not losing her cool. She's laying out the facts. Methodically. No proof, no DNA, no experts. Two experts denied. That is a prosecutor's mindset applied to defense work. And she did it in real time, under pressure, knowing every word she said was being recorded. That is the exact temperament you need in a press secretary, because the reporters in that briefing room are going to try the same tricks, right? They're going to ask loaded questions. They're going to try to get you to say something they can clip and spin and actually have on record. And Habba has proven she can stand in the middle of that and not flinch. And she went on to say, "I have sat with President Trump for years now, while he has been targeted with lies with judges, AGs, attorney generals, and NDAs who have specifically run in this city and others on getting Trump." And she understands the game because she has been in the middle of it. She has seen the weaponization of the justice system up close. She had a federal judge sanction her for suing Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton. And she said, "By the way, I'm proud of that," right? You saw Sonny Hostin basically trying to correct her and say it wasn't Hillary Clinton, it was Bill Clinton. So I say the Clintons, all right? So Bill Clinton appointed judge. And she said, "By the way, I'm proud of that. I'm proud of what I did because it was the right thing to do." This is a woman with spine. That is a woman who will not be intimidated. And the media tried to corner her on the Comey indictment. A reporter asked her about James Comey's Instagram post where he used the code 8647. Now, for those who don't know, 86 is a code. In the military and in certain circles, 86 means to get rid of something. In a restaurant setting, 86 means we're out of an item. But James Comey, a former FBI director, knows exactly what he was doing. Habba explained it perfectly. She said, quote, "He knows what 8647 meant. There's no question about it." He actually went on TV later. 86 means to kill the president, to get rid of the president, and that's what it means. By the way, his words, not mine. That's what she said, quote unquote. And she pointed out that after Comey's post, a regular citizen posted 86 Habba on Twitter and was charged in Florida. A regular citizen got charged for doing the exact same thing a former FBI director did. And the media wants to pretend there's no double standard. And she called it out right there on live television. And then a reporter tried to hit her with the hypocrisy card. They brought up that Matt Gaetz used the phrase 86 many times and nothing happened to him. And you know what she said? "I think we look at everything. I'll be honest with you. Absolutely everything is in context. I don't think anybody is immune to it." And that is a fair answer. That's somebody who understands that consistency matters. She didn't dodge. She didn't deflect. She said context matters and nobody is above the law. But then a reporter tried to pivot and asked about a post where Trump supposedly said death to Democrats. And watch how she handled that, because she said, "I haven't seen that post and I would tell you what I did." She didn't defend it blindly. She didn't attack the reporter. She said, "I haven't seen it, and let me tell you what I do know." And then she said, "Nobody should be inciting violence, period." That is a disciplined answer, family. That is a professional who understands that her credibility matters more than winning every exchange. She drew a clear line. Nobody should incite violence, period. And then she pivoted back to the real issue, which is the Department of Justice under Trump is bringing real cases, not political hit jobs like the ones Jack Smith and Letitia James ran. A reporter tried to bring up the sanction against Abba, the $1 million sanction for filing a frivolous lawsuit, and she didn't run from it. She said, I don't want to hear about weaponization because the reason you all know who I am is because of weaponization. I sat through targeting. She wore that sanction like a badge of honor because it came from fighting back against the weaponized system. She sued Hillary Clinton, right? And then a Hillary Clinton appointed judge sanctioned her, and she's proud of it. And that is not somebody who's going to fold when a CNN reporter tries to bully her at the podium. Now, here's where I want to step back and talk about what this all means for you, family, for everyday Americans who are watching this and wondering why any of this matters. Because I know a lot of you thinking, okay, so a press secretary is leaving, another one might take her place. How does this affect my life? Let me tell you, the press secretary is the person who stands between the American people and the administration's message. They are the one who takes the questions, who pushes back against false narratives, who makes sure that what you hear is actually what the administration is doing. If the press secretary is weak, the media writes the story. If the press secretary is strong, the administration controls the narrative. And in a world where the media is openly hostile to the president and his agenda, having a strong voice at the podium is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Think about it from an everyday perspective. You got a boss at work who represents your department to upper management. If that boss is weak, your department gets blamed for everything. Your projects get cut, your budgets get slashed. But if that boss is strong, if that boss can articulate the value of what you're doing and push back against the criticism, your department thrives. That's what a press secretary does on a national scale. They represent the administration to the entire country, and when they do it well, the American people get to hear the truth directly without the filter of a biased media. And that's exactly what Karoline Leavitt did. She walked into that briefing room every day knowing that the majority of the people in that room were rooting for her to fail, and she didn't. She broke through. She opened the door to independent media. She made sure the voices outside the corporate media bubble got to access the White House. And now whoever takes her place has to carry that torch forward. And this is where the bigger conversation comes in, because the media, the corporate media, has spent the last decade losing the trust of the American people. The Gallup polls, the Pew studies, every major survey shows that trust in mainstream media is at a historic lows. Less than 30% of Americans trust the media to report the news fairly and accurately. And this is why I do what I do. And that number keeps dropping with the mainstream liberal media. Why? Because the media stopped reporting and started advocating. They stopped asking questions and started pushing narratives. And they stopped covering both sides and started picking sides. And American people noticed, right? And this is why I do what I do, being objective, looking at both sides and just telling you guys the truth with receipts, no agenda, no narrative, no spin. And we just have a productive conversation about it. I'm not telling you what to think or how to think. Now, you got a White House that's fighting back. You got a press secretary who understands that the media is not a neutral institution. They are a political actor. And when you treat them like when you push back against their loaded questions and their false premises, they don't know what to do. And they're used to running the show. They're used to politicians who are afraid of them. And when somebody like Karoline Leavitt or Alina Habba stands up and says, no, I'm not going to let you frame this your way, they lose their minds. And that's what this transition, that's why this transition matters. Because the media is hoping that without Leavitt, they can regain control of the narrative, and they're hoping that the next press secretary will be less combative, less effective, less willing to call them out. And if they get somebody like Scott Jennings, somebody who has been sitting on their own set for years, they're going to find out real quick that he knows all their tricks. He knows how they operate because he's been in that room with them. He sat on them paddles. He sat on those panels. He's watched them play their games, and he's not going to be fooled by it. But if they get Alina Habba, and I believe she's the right choice, whether she says she's in the running or not, they're going to get something even more dangerous to their narrative. They're going to get a woman who has been through the legal ringer and came out on the other side with her integrity intact, a woman who has been sanctioned by a Clinton-appointed judge and wore it as a badge of honor, a woman who stood in front of the media and said, I'm not having any second thoughts about representing President Trump, and it is the proudest thing I could ever do. And that is the kind of person you want defending this administration, because she's not going to crack under pressure. She's not going to get flustered by a hostile question. She's not going to let the media frame the narrative, and she's going to walk in there, state the facts, and dare them to challenge her. Now, let me close this out with something that I think is important for all of us to take away from this, whether it's Abba, whether it's Scott Jennings, whether it's Kelly or Boyle, or any other of the names being floated. The principle is the same. The media wants you to believe that this administration is falling apart because a 28-year-old mother decided to spend more time with her two babies. That's the story they're selling. And if you buy it, you're letting them control what you think. But if you look at the facts, if you look at the actual data, what you see is an administration with a deep bench of talent, with multiple qualified candidates ready to step up, with a president who knows exactly what he wants in that role. And there's no chaos. There's no crisis. There is a family decision by a young mother and a transition that will be handled professionally. And the media is desperate to convince you otherwise, because they can't stand the idea that this administration is functioning well enough to handle a personnel change without drama. And they need you to believe that everything is falling apart because that's the only story they know how to tell. Don't fall for it, family. Keep your eyes open. Watch what actually happens. And when the next press secretary steps behind that podium, you watch how the media treats them. You watch the loaded questions. You watch the gotcha attempts. You watch the editing and the spin. And then you make up your own mind about who's telling the truth. Okay. Now, here's the scripture for today, because I always like to leave you with something to think about beyond just politics. Sorry, family. Isaiah chapter 54, verse 17. No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue which rises against you in judgment you shall condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their righteousness is from me. Think about that for a second. No weapon formed against you shall prosper. Karoline Leavitt had every weapon the media could throw at her: loaded questions, false premises, character attacks, everything, and none of it stuck. She walked out of that job with her reputation intact, with the president's trust intact, with her family growing, and every tongue that rose against her in judgment, she condemned through her competence and her character. And the same is going to be true for whoever takes her place. Because when you stand for truth, when you stand for what's right, the weapons don't prosper. They just don't. And for those who may not be spiritual, here's the life wisdom. When you know who you are, what you stand for, nobody can take that from you. The media tried to define Karoline Leavitt. They tried to define Alina Habba. They try to define every conservative who steps into that arena, actually. Not defend. They try to define every conservative. But definitions only stick if you accept them. If you keep showing up, keep doing the work, keep telling the truth, the narrative they try to build about you falls apart on its own. You don't have to fight every battle. You just have to be consistent. You just have to be real. And over time, the truth wins. It always does. So let me know what you think in the comments, family. Who do you want to see behind that podium? Hit the like button, share the video with somebody who needs to hear the real story, subscribe to the channel, turn on those post notifications, spread that peace, love, and positivity, and let the love supersede the hate, family. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.